This is Docere Digest Podcast, breaking down health concepts. This podcast is brought to you by Docere Life Center. This innovative clinic is finding new solutions to the evolving challenges mankind faces in the 21st century. By utilizing cutting-edge technology and testing, they find root causes and also offer treatment with energy and nutrition. What is the mission? To dynamically change lives for the better while impacting families for generations. The information shared directly or indirectly in the Docere Digest podcast is not to be understood as or misconstrued as medical advice. This information is not a replacement for your current health provider who is acutely aware of your current health state and course of treatment. Any information shared about a product or service discussed by any host or guest on this podcast is not to be interpreted as a doctor-patient relationship.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jayson Frank. Welcome back to another episode of Docere Digest. Today, I have the blessed opportunity to speak with the York family and kind of share the trials and tribulations they've been through and how we've been able to work together to help their daughter, Amanda. So without further ado, Jayson and Lyndsey, thank you for being on today.
Of course.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't you kind of give us a background story of Amanda kind of growing up, what she went through, the things that she did amazing with all of her drama and all the things like this, and then what led that to college and kind of where we ended up and why you guys sought me out.
So Amanda is our middle child. We've got two boys on our bookends. And so growing up, she was our most social girl of the family. Played a lot of sports when she was younger, excelled at gymnastics, soccer, and then her artistry. She was always just an amazing artist, really great student. The only problem really that she ever had growing up was she had a little bit of an eye problem, kind of a lazy eye situation. But other than that, like pretty great. We lived in a rural area of Illinois up until she was in second grade when we decided to move our entire family overseas to a third world country and serve in the Dominican Republic. So even there, we were there for 3 years. We dealt a little bit with some sicknesses and stomach bugs and things like that, but her personality just really seemed to thrive in that type of environment. She absolutely loves people. She really developed a heart for serving others, continued just to excel in school and friends, continued to play soccer while she was there, and then also was able to learn how to surf and all sorts of things. She's a really strong swimmer. So then moved back to the States. She did high school, and then she found her love for musical theater and found her voice in a different capacity. And she actually has a beautiful singing voice and a very kind of larger than life presence on the stage. So she was able to be a part of several productions. And by the time she was graduating high school, she was going into musical theater for her major at college. So this was COVID year, actually, when she graduated high school. Her graduation was online. She wasn't able to go. But by the time that, late August, September was rolling around, they were opening colleges. And so this was her first experience. She left home. But of course, everything was still had to be in mass and everything, especially like for theater department kids. It was really hard. So there was kind of a lot of, I would say, external trauma going into it. Really was not a normal first year college experience. And the more that I started to talk with Amanda on the phone and through some FaceTime calls, there were definitely some things I started to notice about her that she was really starting to struggle with. One of them was she started to lose a ton of weight. And
Where a lot of kids go to school their freshman year and gain the freshman 20 or 40, she was having the opposite problem.
She was having the opposite problem, and she also started to experience really, really severe anxiety. And that had not been her, like, especially when she knew she was getting ready to actually go to like theater class or whatever, which was her main thing, she would call me from like a bathroom stall, just completely out of sorts. And it was very unusual, but it was hard at those beginnings to know if anything was seriously wrong, because it is COVID year, and is it just being behind a mask? I don't know. So all of these things. So she ended up getting pretty ill on campus during the month of October. And because Amanda went early to college, she was only 17. They actually refused to treat her without a parent present at like a nearby clinic. So we were able to kind of sort of get her a general antibiotic. I believe that last illness truly did something to her, where something just completely blew up in her body. And so by the time that we actually got her home for Thanksgiving, she was like a shell of the person that we sent just a couple months before. She had developed these horrific body tics that we had no idea what was happening. It was just all the time. And any sort of loud noise just sent her into complete hysterics. She started not being able to be more than probably a foot away from me at like all times, like just severe separation anxiety. And I remember her trying to get her back into a church service, and she just had complete panic attacks with the sound and the people and all this stuff. And so we started off with a regular kind of a general practitioner doctor to get her in, because like the anxiety was so high. She comes from a long line of people that have some anxiety issues. So we thought, okay, we're just going to go there because it looks like maybe this is where she needs the most help. And so they recommended a pretty big anti-anxiety med for her. So we got her on that.
Not pretty big, but they kept
like,
increasing her dose.
Yeah.
And they increased it pretty rapidly. They increased the dosage of it.
Yeah. So within just a couple of weeks, she actually like kind of went downhill further.
She had a little bit of a bump, seemed like maybe she was doing better because you get a little bit more serotonin, your serotonin receptors are working better. That's what the drug does. And she seemed like she got a little better for maybe a couple of weeks. And then within a month of that, she went downhill again. And then that's when the passing out started. Because we were convinced that part of that was what people describe as serotonin syndrome, where your body has too much of it in the system and passing out and different things like that.
Yeah. So we definitely had a lot of advice from the medical community at this beginning window. I mean, she's just turned 18. She's a young female girl. It's the year of COVID. She went off to school. And so they really did kind of push for possibly admitting her into kind of like a psychiatric type facility.
As a matter of fact, we were told by the nurse practitioner who was caring for her, if she didn't have parents who were there with her 24/7 doing all these things, she would have said, you have to take her to a behavioral health institute and have her admitted. This is what's very, very important about this, I think, Dr. Frank. And if like for your patients, for people who see this video, if there's something that I want people to hear, it's this part. She was in the hospital 4 different times at 4 different hospitals. And that doesn't include ER visits where we were never inpatient. So inpatient 4 times, but in multiple ER visits. At all 4 hospitals, we heard the exact same story. And it was this. The medical side would say, she has conversion disorder. She's converting past trauma into some sort of psychosomatic medical issue. And at every single hospital, she had a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a behavioral health specialist talk with her. And every single hospital, the behavioral health psychologist, psychiatrist said, I don't know what's going on, but she doesn't have conversion disorder. And we had that experience 4 times. In addition to that, we also have a family friend who works at a behavioral health hospital. And he took Amanda through an entire differential for conversion disorder and several other psychiatric issues. And at the end of it, he said, she doesn't have that. He kind of threw his hands up, it doesn't have that. She went to see an independent counselor at a psychologist's office. After one visit for an hour, the lady came out, said to Amanda and to me in the lobby, Amanda, you can come back and see me if you want, but you don't have conversion disorder. And I think that's a really, really important part of the story. And there are going to be hundreds and thousands of families that have this exact same experience, who need to find a place where somebody will treat their child, where everybody else is punting it back and forth. We had the fortunate event in the fall of 2021, a year later after all of this started. Unfortunately, Amanda was in the hospital in Louisville, where she was going to school at the time. She tried to go back to school that following fall and ended up in the hospital. And in Louisville, we had the same story. The medical side came in with all the residents. I think there were maybe 12 or 13 people that came in rounding on her that day. And the hospitalist, the chief of general medicine there, came in and sat down on the bed and said, your daughter has internalized trauma and she's converting it into all of these health issues. And that's what's going on with her. And I said, we didn't need to come all the way here and spend 5 days in the hospital for you to tell me something I know isn't true. And then in the same day, there's a guy there who is a neuropsychologist. And he came in and he sat down and he said, look, there are times when children have these things, when medicine doesn't understand what's going on and psychology doesn't know what's going on. And everybody just starts punting them back and forth and nobody knows what to do for these children. And our daughter was one of those people. And there's hundreds of those kids out there. I'll just say, if you are a parent and you're watching this and you can relate to anything that I just shared there, just know that there is help to be had out there, but you may not find it in medicine and psychology, because they may be punting you and your children back and forth for weeks, months, or years even. Okay. That's a big part of the story, I think.
It's rough to go through as a parent, just to not get answers, and you're praying for answers and nobody has it. So it's a rough thing to go through there. So
it's really hard. I mean,
ahead.
Thankfully, you know your kid, and you know there's something severely wrong, and it's very hard in the medical world to find anybody that will actually give you time to like actually listen, and that would go through like a gamut of symptoms and things that don't seem to be related, but they only want to treat like maybe one, or to look at one of those things rather than, you know, looking at the entire person. Like something severely went wrong when she was 17 years old, you know. And so I turned into a huge advocate for Amanda. I scoured books on all of her symptoms that she was having, and we went from, you know, physical tics to verbal tics to seizures to then developing of POTS that we did not know what it was at the time. We would find her passed out in the yard with the dog, on the driveway, coming out of the bathroom. We had no idea what was going on. We played
loss of use of limbs.
Yeah, you know, loss of speech when she would come to.
No memory, complete amnesia.
I mean, all sorts of just horrible symptoms, you know, being all of a sudden afraid to take a shower. And, you know, it was so overwhelming to get dressed because all of a sudden she had texture issues. You know, she would go ballistic if something of a different texture would all of a sudden touch her skin. Light sensitivity.
Too hot, too cold, light sensitivity, all those things.
I mean, we were on 24/7 all the time with her. It was horrible, and trying to figure it out. And I finally landed on this word of PANDAS, you know, something that happens.
Pediatric autoimmune neurological disorder after strep.
And so we started to ask some of these other doctors, and we actually were told by two different
hospitals.
In hospital, and then one from a general practitioner that they do not want to discuss that word, and if we were to press it, they would escort us out.
Yeah, they would no longer treat her.
So we had to find somewhere that could.
There's one other piece of this too that I think is important because families will deal with this. We did find somebody here in our area, we're in Chicago,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna.
who was willing to talk about this and willing to go down that road at least a little ways. And we found a little bit of hope there that there was at least somebody willing to listen and try to dig through this. But what became evident, we weren't in that process with them very long. I mean, we started with them after the hospital stay, say November 1st of 2021. And we were in your office by the end of March 2022. So it was only within that window of what I'm describing and what Lyndsey already talked about, where we found he's an allergist, and his PA who was willing to help us with some of this stuff. And we did what's it called? Western blot.
Well, before that, when we arrived in her office, she did start with, it was kind of a little bit of a breath of fresh air, because she did start with a ton of blood work, and it did show that, yeah, she had a ton of antibodies from some massive illnesses that were in her system.
Mono, Lyme, different things.
The strep, all of that, everything.
Yeah.
And so at that time, the treatment for her was to be on very heavy doses of antibiotics
For 6 to 12 months.
So we were on them for about 5 months, every single day, also with 3 different steroid bursts to try to
Get that moving.
help her. And so there was maybe a little bit of.
She would do better with the steroids. When we would go on the steroids, it would take a day or so, and then all of a sudden she'd have that pick me up.
Yeah, I mean, she still was bedridden. She would, we'd still find her in a corner sometimes, banging her head against the wall in the middle of the night. I mean, just very strange. Some of it, I think, helped to bring some of the symptoms down. But after a check-in with her, and she also recommended to get the tonsils out, got her tonsils out. She seemed to do a little bit better right after that surgery. But then, everything went downhill again. And she recommended that we, somebody that does just a little bit better on this certain type of antibiotic, Lyme disease might be the root cause. And so we had to do a very invasive test, and she did come back positive for about 4 different strains of Lyme disease.
Well, that's where I was going. I wanted to add this part because if you're a family and you're dealing with this, what that Western blot, is that what it's called? Am I getting that right? Yeah. Okay. It showed that she had all these different strains of Lyme disease, but then in the doctor's office, we were told, look, she has it, but the CDC says we can't diagnose it because there's a range or whatever that they only allow. Yeah. And so they weren't medically allowed to treat it. So she's telling us she has it, but we can't say she has it. Is this basically what that was?
Well, so anyway, at that point, leaving her office, we had a lot more antibiotics. We were headed for IVIG treatment with all of that. And then we also needed to go see a Lyme specialist in Chicago, which I called in the car.
Like 6 months.
And we were on a 6-month wait.
Yeah.
So we got home, and I just did not feel good about keeping her on those meds. And that's when we first heard your name drop.
Yeah. I know you got questions for us. I just want to add one more part for the sake of.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the parts, there's so many pieces that we don't share a lot with people, but for families and especially parents out there, Amanda had to sleep in our bed for a better part of 2 years, year and a half anyway, which meant we were apart. And many of those nights, I had to sleep on the floor blocking the door so that she couldn't run away. As we'll maybe talk about here with the parasites and things like that, that's a nighttime issue more than anything. Yeah. And so the issues that we dealt with overnight were the most severe probably. And one of them included having to block doors and sleep in front of doors so that she couldn't get out. So the only reason I want to share all that is because we want people to know our story, that maybe it would help somebody if you're dealing with this stuff. Like, it's real, and there's other people that have gone through it.
Gut wrenching. So how did you hear about me? Let's go over that real quick.
So this is the really important part of networking, because you just never know who you tell your story to, what help you might receive. So I actually have an aunt. So I'm in Chicago. My aunt lives in Missoula, Montana. She works with another guy, and she happened to be sharing a little bit. And actually, this guy had just come back from being out of the office. Well, he was in Kansas with you.
Yeah.
And so they started talking about Amanda a little bit. And so this coworker of hers ended up giving her Macy's story. My
Yep.
aunt sent it to us. I watched it. I said, oh boy, I relate so much
We
to
related to
this,
so much about it going on in their story.
but this is also way outside of the box. You know, I don't know if Jayson's gonna be how he's gonna be like wondering about this or whatever. So I had him watch the video, and there were just like so many pieces that, like, yep, we've been there. That is what she looks like. That's, you know, this, and all sorts of things that family is in Wisconsin. So it's like all these networking, different places. So we actually set up a phone call with your client in Montana, because we needed to know what
What you're getting into here.
what level of crazy is this?
No,
too?
that's not true. That is not accurate at all. He said, I know somebody that might be able to help you. He actually dealt with some things that were more similar to what Amanda's going through than we realized.
Yeah.
But as he was sharing, like, an inability to be in the car with all the electronics, we were like, wow, that is weird. Like, you can see some of that with Amanda in different situations. And it was, while his story is not even remotely close, there also are some similarities within it that we said, like, he wanted to share those with us. And then we were like, okay, this might be a place where they might be able to deal with what she's going through.
I think that when you tell your story to so many people in the medical world, and so many people dismiss it over and
Yeah.
over and over again, I think you feel, well, first of all, you feel really disvalued, and you feel as though, is this really happening? I need some sort of validation. And so it was very important for us to actually talk to another person who had been treated by your clinic,
Yeah, that's right.
because it was such a horrible, very lonely
Yeah.
place to be in. And just honestly, there's a lot of ridicule also in the medical community if you decide to take your child off of something that they have prescribed,
Yeah.
that they think is the key to go to something else out of state, all of this stuff. I mean, it's a very difficult decision to make, but both of us, we just knew something
Had to
was,
change. Yeah.
something had to change. We didn't want our daughter to be on those types of drugs, and it wasn't even improving all that much. I mean, maybe instead of like a horrible day being at a 10, maybe it was at a 9.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't even
Yeah,
that much
it was
to
negligible.
risk.
Okay, here's my message to the parents again, if you're listening. The medical community is full of condescension towards the patients. That's partly driven because they don't have the time to spend with you. And so they give you the answer and expect you to accept it. And they don't want to spend the time to help you understand why that's their answer, or even that you should have the questions about that comes. But then also what Lyndsey said is very important. If you don't do what they recommend in the 3 minutes they give you to recommend it, you are looked at as non-compliant. You know, you're not doing what's best for your child, all those kinds of things. And so I think it's very important as parents, if you're dealing with all this bad stuff, you're looking for answers, and then you're being talked down to by medical professionals, and you know that what they're saying does not line up one for one with what you're dealing with at home.
Yeah.
Just know there's others of us that have been there.
Yeah.
So-
Sorry. It's
No,
just,
go ahead.
it's just so hard, especially with the age of teenagers. If this happens at all in the teenage years, it is very, very difficult to have the medical community actually listen, because they will write it off as a lot of other things.
That's right. And everything is driven or pushed towards psychology, and maybe for good reason in some places, in some situations, but everything is assumed to be a psychological issue.
So it was a couple of years ago that we were sitting here and I was talking to you guys in this room, and you're sitting back there and Amanda was sitting in front of you. You guys go, she's just like Macy. And I'm looking at Amanda, she's just sitting there kind of just staring at me. And I'm like, okay. I mean, she seems like she's not terrible. And so we made it an opportunity for you guys to come down and see us. And I think it was like a week or two later, I was at a conference and you were able to get a hold of me through the clinic, and she's in a wheelchair. She's not moving. Can we get any sooner? I said, I'll be back on Monday or something. I think you guys came down. We got started right away. So when she came in that first 2-week visit, we were there. She was in a wheelchair coming in. And I said, okay, this is a little different than what I thought we were getting into. And it was probably a little bit more than what I'd experienced some of the other patients before. It was a lot more intense. So tell the story from my side here. When she came in, I'm going to share a little bit. I hope it's okay. She came in with 4 different types of Lyme, many other co-infections in there, some virus issues, and then she also showed up with a parasite issue called Chagas, or Trypanosoma cruzi, which we assume she got it while she was in the Dominican, and this was manifesting issues in her brain. And it was interesting, different ways we try to treat it or come after it, and how her body respond or react to it. I mean, there's some things that are just absolutely wild how it manifested there. So first 2 weeks we got her in, and we were able to go through and do a lot of treatments, clean some stuff up, get kind of a handle on what was going on. And then we're going to put together a treatment protocol. Then you guys would go home. We're going to kind of monitor from home. You guys left on the full moon. So for those of you watching, you don't understand the significance of the full moon. This is when parasites, a majority of them or most of them, actually start laying eggs and producing toxins and becoming very much of a problem. And I said, I made special circumstance for you guys to get a hold of me in case of emergency. And you guys contacted me as in Des Moines.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we made it from Wichita to Des Moines before we had a problem.
And she was banging her head against the glass. She threw up, if I believe, is that right? You guys were trying to get her in. And so we're over here on a Zoom call trying to sit there and figure out what we can do, get her to bounce back down for they can get home the rest of the way that night. And it was like, for me, I'd been down this road with Macy, and it was a very long road for me, even as a doctor and practitioner. I'll be honest, there's times where you want to sit in the closet and cry because you're trying to figure this out. And going, okay, Lord, what do I do with this? How do I fix this? And I said, here we go again. I said, Lord, give me the strength, give me the ability to be able to do this. And this has been a very interesting case because it led me down crazy roads to go find crazy things that helped. So
Yeah.
is there anything else you guys want to share about kind of the first way we got started there, or when what was your first impression the first couple of weeks you were in office and I started doing treatment on her?
Well, even before we got there, your willingness and the staff's willingness to just listen was a completely different experience. And honestly, Amanda, at that point, she was kind of refusing to see anybody else because of how horrible they would make her feel as a person.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, the biggest thing is that from that first Zoom call, Amanda was willing to be seen by you. And that was a huge, huge thing. She, even though she wasn't all herself, she knew that there was something different about the way that you actually listened, and that you didn't,
And the questions that were being asked.
yeah, and it wasn't questions like, are you really sure that's what
Right.
you're
Can we have your
experiencing?
parents leave the room and ask you some more questions? It was nothing like that.
It wasn't anything like that. And so I mean, when we got down there, we didn't know what to expect. We really didn't. And I mean, it just,
Here, I'll put it. I brought them down there, was able to stay for about 24 hours and then had to come back.
Yep.
And Lyndsey would text me or FaceTime me and say, Amanda's in red light or Amanda's in laser therapy or whatever it was. And look, let's just be frank, honest about this up front. We were wondering what was going on. Like, you never, these things,
Yeah.
you don't read about these things, and you don't see them on TV, and you don't, it's not like you go on Fox News and see this kind of treatment. So it's all new to somebody when they show up.
Absolutely.
And there's no context for anybody to say, well, it's like this or like that. It's not. It's totally a different thing. And there's just no way to describe it, and there's no way to really relate to it, I think, for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is that it was working. And it wasn't obviously, within the first 3
Yeah.
weeks. I mean, this has been a very long process to strip back and
It's been
get,
2 years that we've been working with you.
but there were things that, like, I don't know, I mean, just being like completely, she'd be completely glazed over and just not responsive, and just like simple. I mean, it seemed simple to you is to suggest, a lemon, and to see like an immediate response
Yeah.
from your child who is completely out of it 1 second, and then comes, back into speaking again the next. I don't know, but there were these things, these glimmers of hope that I think we're on to something here.
And can I add to that? I actually think there's a flip side to that actually was encouraging, although hard, is Dr. Frank, you'll remember there were several moments in each of those visits where we were there where you were actually able to get her to respond negatively to things.
Yeah.
And what part of the importance of that, as I'm sure you could explain better than me, part of the importance of that was we were recognizing you were able to put your thumb into whatever the issue was and draw out that response and then deal with it.
Yep.
And where a lot of times we were just sort of waiting for things to happen, you were able to get those things to happen and then sort of see what was going on.
Yeah. Kind of try to exasperate that and see what was setting it off. And then,
Yeah.
okay, now how do we fix that? So
Yeah,
just
right.
waiting for that to go into place there. So
Right.
I think I remember it was because she was in the wheelchair the first time she came in. And I don't remember, was Jayson on the phone when we went there and said, "Oh, sir, peduncles." And you go, "Oh yeah, the peduncles."
Yeah.
And he's like, "What?"
Like, what?
Are the brain that deals with movement
We
patterns.
did a lot of
And
research on a lot of words we'd never heard before, that's for sure.
I know.
so we
I
found
know. I
that
would
issue.
look up like all the ingredients and be like, okay, I'm looking this up.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, oh, used for lupus. Okay, let me look it up.
Well, okay, can I just say this? I mean, look, we can see you sitting in your office. This is your exam room right
Yeah.
behind, right? And if you talk to Dr. Frank over a Zoom call, which you're going to do initially, probably, unless you live in Wichita, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see him sitting in that chair with all that stuff behind you. And you're going to think to yourself, what on earth is going on back there? And then you're going to show up in the office, you're going to sit in that chair right behind him there, and you're going to see him go through all of these things, and you're going to think, what on earth is going on here? But it's just because you don't, none of us, unless you've been there, you don't have any context for what that kind of treatment is like. You just don't.
Yeah. It's kind of a wild and crazy road how I even got down into doing what I'm doing. It's definitely something God led me down. So being faithful and following the footsteps there.
You should do a
what's
podcast on
interesting in that I think it's what was at the end of the first week she was here, she started walking again.
It took a
Like a
little
baby giraffe?
while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that she was actually sitting in your chair, and she had been there for a few days, and we had been moving her back and forth in a wheelchair, and both you and I noticed her foot started to, move a little bit. And definitely by the time that we were kind of wrapping those day appointments up, she was back on her feet again and really trying to get back into moving normally again. But it was probably about a good 3 weeks that first time, and it wasn't the last time she was in a wheelchair. That neurological piece, it's probably been the most
I
difficult.
think in the beginning, why we first started was we thought so much of it was Lyme, and why we worked and we got that Lyme cleared out a lot quicker. It came back down to that Chagas, which was the main issue. And she'd have a flare up of it. She'd end back in the wheelchair. There are several times where she didn't know she was. She went from being this, I'm going to use the word vivacious. She has a very vivacious personality. I mean, if she enters a room, you know it in all of its glory.
Somebody described it as
High energy.
gregarious. Gregarious, yeah.
But at the same time, though, she'd forget who she was, who her family members were, and she acted like an 8 or 9 year old who was just absolutely just scared and timid and didn't know who she was. And okay, bring it back in. So I think it was still the first year. I was sitting there going, okay, I got to reach outside my box. I have a lot of things in my room. I don't have enough. And so me as a doctor, I had to think outside the box. I'm like, well, what else can I do? So I'm going through and I'm trying to test out. I'm walking through grocery stores, garden shops, whatever I can, trying to find stuff. I came across the white rose. So I said, all right. So I have a machine. We're copying the frequency of it in so I can try to make an energetic medicine for her. And I was getting ready to throw the rose away. I go, oh, go give it to her. She's in the other room. She's getting some laser therapy on her brain. And she's sitting there and gave it to her and bachelorette. And I gave it to her. She kind of smiled at me and smelt it. And then her dog just started barking and she was back. She was crying. You ran in there. You were holding her. And everyone in the office was crying except for me. I was crying too. We were all just, I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it right now. It was such a profound moment. I mean, staff, everybody, we're all just like, oh my goodness, that just happened.
She went from
And
complete
tears come back.
amnesia to completely back in a matter
After
of
smelling the rose.
from smelling the rose.
I go, there's something in that. It wasn't a red rose, it wasn't a pink rose, it was a white rose specifically. That is what she tested to. Well, I was at the grocery store and that's why I got it. And it blew me away. It's like, wow, there's something in that. So now
Dr.
when
Frank,
I travel, go ahead.
can you say or share? I mean, you say whatever you're comfortable with, but I think this part of the story is fascinating. Is you have connections into traditional medicine,
Yes.
and you were willing to investigate through traditional medicine what you might be able to do to help Amanda through what we might call not traditional medicine. And
Exactly.
you spent a lot of time doing that.
I with Amanda, I was going everywhere I could and wherever I felt God would lead me. I'm like, I've got something here I'm working on here, but so, and I don't think I really ever shared with you guys in the beginning, but if you get a diagnosis of Chagas, especially neurologically, the outcome isn't great. I mean, it really isn't. So I wasn't, so I didn't want to be spreading, false hope. I also didn't want to discourage you at the same time. And so we're up against a serious ailment here, a serious infection, something that's very difficult. And while I don't think she's 100% yet, I would gamble 90, 95. Where would you guys put her?
Above 80 for sure.
Oh yeah. The real kind of change started last May, where all of a sudden, like, you could see, and I do highly encourage parents to keep a daily journal
It's really
on their
helpful.
child. And there's some great apps. I mean, times of day we have found out, especially through working with you, are highly important as to when you see symptoms starting to come and what's coming on and what it is. And so with that, I was able to really track, okay, we've gone a week, like, no seizures. We've gone,
which seems crazy, but that was a huge thing.
I mean, you're talking about 13 to 20 some seizures every single day. She couldn't go anywhere. She had to wear an alert
Can I say something? When we say the word seizures, one of the things that was diagnosed from the beginning is that her seizures are what are called pseudo seizures. They're not epileptic in that her brain is actually, or the neurological system is firing like a true epileptic seizure is, where all body systems go crazy. Her seizures are pseudo seizures in that she passes out, she loses consciousness, and she has convulsions and other symptoms that go along with that. But they're not seizures in the epileptic sense. They're pseudo seizures, and they look like seizures, but something else is going on.
Yeah, so she had to wear an alert everywhere. She could actually tell when
eventually she got
something
be able to tell that they were coming on.
was coming on. And so with that, we were able to start tracking, and then, like, it was like these amazing celebrations, like, Amanda, like, you're a month of,
Well,
like,
even early on, it was like you went a whole day without one. You went 3 days without one. Oh, we had another one. Now we went another 3 days. Like, it was literally like that for a while.
I mean, it was like, it's crazy to say this, but all of a sudden I felt okay with her walking from her room to the bathroom, and I didn't have to walk alongside of her. She could make it there and back again. And then, she obviously had lost, we didn't put her behind a wheel of a car.
To be able to drive.
And then, like, 6 months, I think you might be able to maybe venture out,
And I had to take my 20-year-old daughter out to learn to drive again. Like, I had to go, she still had a driver's license, but I had to go teach her to drive.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But she did it, and she's doing great.
I mean, just last month, she was able to fly to a different state all on her own.
All by herself.
Like, That's crazy.
Yeah.
That threw me off when I saw her when she was out. I'm like, you're not at home. I said, where's your parents?
Yeah,
I'm on
where's
my
your,
own.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
like,
Yeah. Turn the camera around. Are your parents there? Yeah, exactly. You know,
I'm
Dr.
like,
Frank,
hold on.
we wanted this to be about hope. And I think this is
Yeah.
a really important part of this. What Lyndsey's saying is those big milestones. But, you know, you asked us, maybe she's 90% or 95%, you know, definitely better than 80. But to understand what that means, like that percentage could mean anything to anybody. 0% was no memory, no use of her limbs, couldn't speak at
Depression.
times, depression. And I'll just say, at least for my own self, there's a couple of really, really important moments, but two of them specifically, where Amanda looked me in the eye with Lyndsey sitting there and said, "Am I going to die?" And I think she thought I think that's what she thought, and that's what we thought too. It was that bad in those moments that we had no hope that she would live through it. So when we say 80% or 90% now, it's not just she's doing better. Like we went from we didn't think she was going to make it to now she's a mostly functioning 21-year-old girl.
Yeah.
That's hope. That's real hope over 2 years to go from we believe she's going to die to she's got a hope of a life.
Yeah. That's really, in this clinic, I tell people I'm super competitive in my treatment room. I don't like to lose.
Yeah.
I don't care
Yeah,
what the odds are, how they're stacked against me. I'll go do whatever I can. I'll travel wherever. I'll figure out whatever we need to do, because that's kind of how God built me. I like puzzles to a degree. I like to go through and figure some of the stuff out. I'll tell you what, one of the hardest moments I had with all this was probably not last Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving before, when she came down. She didn't know who she was and didn't recognize anybody. We were waiting for that big aha moment like we had the rose the last time, and it wasn't coming. And she turned, she looked at me, she was like, "Are you going to fix me so I know who my family is at Thanksgiving?" That broke me a little bit, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And I remember getting that text from you saying she's back. It was like a week later, and I was just like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah.
And I was really nervous for that one, because I'm like, what is going on here? We are up against the wall. And then to see you guys post on the Christmas pictures, she's smiling, her personality's back. I tell you what, that was a blessing for me. That was the best Christmas present I think I got that year. To be honest, I was like, man,
Yeah.
really trying to get in there and save another one. I think, the story about the kid on the seashell throwing the excuse me,
The starfish back in the ocean. Yeah. You made a
into the
difference.
ocean, and I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help other doctors so we can get together and let's save another one, and working for it. And we're not out of the woods yet, there's still some things we're kind of working on there, but the trees are thinning and we're seeing the light coming through and we're feeling the warmth on our face. So I think that's pretty
That's a
powerful.
good point. And you think about somebody's journey. I mean, if somebody's watching this and they're thinking about coming to see you, they hear the beginning and they hear the end. But you have to recognize, like, it's a lot of steps forward and a lot of steps backwards. And sometimes you see regression, you think, okay, this isn't working. But the reality is like, it's a long journey from wherever you start to wherever your kid's going to end up, or wherever you're going to end up. It's you. But like, it's not always going to be every step moving forward. Yeah. Right. You're gonna go back and forth, and these things are gonna come back, and we got to treat them and come back, and you got to treat them. It just takes a long time.
Different seasons, different pressures in the air barometrically. There's different moon cycles, so many variables that come back and forth, and we can predict some of these, and other ones that kind of blindside us. And we say, okay, how do we pick up the pieces? What do we need to do? Let's go through and get things balanced out, change the dosage on a few things, and kind of tweak and modify and kind of keep working forward. So it's been a blessing for me to serve you guys and your family. And I just, I pray for you guys all the time. And I'm just so thankful that I had the opportunity to be a page in her story, because she's going to have a really great story. And I'm excited for the future she has. So,
us too. And that's the big thing. I think even last November, I had a conversation with you. Do you think she will ever, have a full normal life? And you know what? She is starting to have a future that is coming. And I don't think any of us would have said that 3 years ago.
Even a year ago, like you just didn't know.
Yeah.
but it does take time. It's not a quick fix that will cover up the symptoms, and I have to say that honestly, your entire office has
All
been
the staff,
so
yeah.
invested in not just your patient Amanda, but honestly, all of our entire family, and just I it's only by God's hand that he knit us together with you.
Yeah.
And he obviously knew what she needed, and we're just so thankful.
Well, I'm very thankful for Macy and her dad for giving me a shot to work with them and to learn so
Yes.
much, and then to share their video for you guys. And you guys are kind of doing the same thing here, sharing your videos so we can try to help other people. And it really would be an honor to serve anybody who has an issue there. So for those of you listening, if you have questions, you can call the office at 316-531-3030. We do offer a free consult. So we can set up on a Zoom call, or you can come in office if you're nearby, and we can sit there and kind of discuss the case and kind of see what kind of options are available and what we can do and how we may be able to start the journey with you and try to help you get results like what Amanda's getting. So any last words, guys?
No, I just say, let's close this with what you said before we started, Dr. Frank. There is hope for a kid. And if you're a family that's struggling and you're at the end of your rope and you just don't know where to go, there is hope to be found. You got to invest in it, time and financially, and the effort at home to do it. But there is hope for a kid that you feel like there's no hope for.
Well, I'm so excited for Amanda's future. So I'm glad to be a part of it. And our staff here, I mean, I have a great staff, and they're just phenomenal. So I'm so excited to introduce them to any of you out there who are looking for help as well. So thank you guys for coming on today and sharing your story, and just being a blessing and paying it forward there a little bit, and praying for you guys always and your amazing family. And you guys are new grandparents now, so that's exciting as well. So all right, guys, peace and blessings. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Docere Digest podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can also find all the episodes and show notes over at docerelifecenter.com. While you're on the website, also be sure to check out the blog, where you'll find videos and articles to help you proactively rebalance your health.